We are in a war. We are all engaged in the battle. It is all around us. There is no avoiding it. These realities have become very clear to us as we thought about what we can possibly do to stop high technology from creating an extinction level event with humans. This may seem as if it's an exaggeration, it may seem as if it's a conspiracy, but it is not. 5G implementation, if we do not start a moratorium and a ban on 5G, 5G has been known to wipe out eggs and ovaries of women. We are talking about an extinction level event for human beings because technology ends up doing what we see in all the science fiction movies, that the machines take over, that the robots take over and the cyborgs take over, and in the end humans become incidental. And this may seem as if it's an exaggeration, but if you look closely at what is really going on, you will find that this war is trying to steal from the human being its most sacred domains, the domain of thinking, the domain of feeling, and the domain of willing. And what machines are trying to do, not necessarily on their own, but by the forces that drive them, is take away human thinking and replace it with sub-thinking, a type of thinking that really doesn't exist in this world. It's a two-dimensional thinking that exists in the realm of the computer, which is really a realm in between the mineral and the plant. And in some cases, when we have caused them to look as an impersonation like a human being, we can even see that sometimes robots look as if they are somewhere in between a plant and an animal. When we see autonomous robots, when we see autonomous weapons, when we see autonomous cars, we have to start asking the question, what is it we're doing? And is this human? And why are we doing this? And who is doing it? And that's what we tried to answer in our recent intelligence report from the Anonymous Patriots is, who is causing this? What's driving it? Is there anything we can do? So we looked around and we saw that over time there have been many moratoriums that have been called and many bans have been called for on high technology. Since 1G, the first generation of wireless, all the way to 5G. And now we see in Europe that there's a moratorium. We see that in certain areas in America there's a moratorium. We see that bans are being called for in certain areas of America. We see that lawsuits are being filed and that people are pointing out with tremendous medical research that electromagnetic frequencies, especially when they reach into the bands that are called 5G, are extremely harmful for the human being. As a matter of fact, they could literally be an extinction level event if the eggs in human ovaries are wiped out. And this is 5G here on the Earth. There's also 5G planned to go into wireless, which would then have 17,000 satellites that beam down wireless to every single speck of the Earth. This is insanity, of course, folks. And so you have to ask a number of questions. How did we ever get to the point that people have to stand up and say, hey, let's look at this new technology because it's killing people. Let's look to see if it's harmful. Let's do longitudinal studies instead of just leaping in to the deep end and assuming that because it's innovation, because it's high technology, that it's good for us. Now, one might assume that there are individuals who are driving this, and there are, and they're driven by their greed. They're driven by their own power, their own lust for what it is they want on the earth. But really what is driving them? They were born into materialism. They were born into a world where machine sub-thinking has ruled their life from the 70s, let's say. Because from the 70s on, computers began to take over our world. And we willingly said that we thought that we were the masters of those devices, which then became our slaves. They started to do our work for us. They started to do so much convenience for us. They started to save time. Everything was about time. Everything was about supposedly creating more time for the human being to be human and let the computers and let the machines do the work as our slaves for us. Unfortunately, because science is just another theory that will be completely supplanted in 100 years, we have been taught that secular humanism, that science, is the truth. But in fact, every single time a theory is changed, it demonstrates that what we were told were the truth. Those theories, those aren't the truth. And so what we're being told about computers is not the truth. We're being told that quantum computers exist. They don't. We're being told that artificial intelligence exists. There's only one artificial intelligence on the face of the earth, and that's deep space. It's Google's DeepMind and its secondary DeepMind 2. And what it does is it plays 5 games at once, and it can beat human beings. And recently, DeepMind used its own programming to create a second DeepMind, which is even faster and more efficient than it is, and seems to be the only device on the face of the earth that actually has artificial intelligence involved. The rest is a myth. The rest are subroutines. The rest are simply millions of hours of human thinking congealed and condensed into applications, into software, into programs, into machines. And the problem is that secular humanism and science tells us that each and every one of us deserves to have these devices for convenience. We deserve to be our own king and queen of our own digital world. A virtual world indeed, but it makes us think that we know everything, that we're omniscient. It thinks that we are omnipotent, that we can do whatever we want and contact the whole globe if we want at one time, our thousands of friends on our social media. And it makes us think that we can be anywhere that we want because we can go onto our smartphone and you can literally dial up anything you want. You can go to the Gobi Desert. You can go to hear what is happening in the U.S. Congress. You can watch anything, anywhere you want. You can even affect things through the Internet of Things from a distance. Your home may be in Hawaii, but in Illinois, you can tell your home what to do. You can answer the door. You can receive a package. You can start your toaster. You can have some coffee made for you from Illinois by pushing a button on your smartphone through the Internet of Things. And so we were born into this, many of us. And now the great danger is that our children will think that this is reality, that the virtual is the real. And this is the heart of illness that is created by the use of technology. Our children are shown that the more they are on their phone, the less empathy they have. The tests are conclusive. Adults, not so much, but children, absolutely. The more they use high tech, the more ill they become. And the less social they become, the lazier they become with their thinking, and the more paralyzed they become to nature. The less they go out in nature, the less they interact with other people. It is an illness that we need to address, and an illness that is not being addressed because people believe that having higher speeds on their iPhone, higher speeds on their smartphone, their computers, are more important than whether their children go blind at night by using their iPhones in darkness, whether they become cold-hearted and lack sympathy and empathy for others, and whether or not they are so paralyzed that their will, their human willpower, is in fact frozen. And the only thing they want to do is to receive more dopamine hits by playing games on the computer, by interacting with social media, and by using the computer to save a lot of time so that they have more time for games and more time for social media. It is an illness of our age, and I think everyone that gives a child an iPhone or an iPad or a computer notices this, but the question is, why don't we change it? The reason we don't is because we are immersed in materialism. Since the early 1800s, everything scientific was considered good. It didn't matter what it was. And everything that could be invented would be invented. And then when we reached the mid-1800s, everything that was invented was then looked at as a possibility, as a weapon to be used against your enemies. And so from the point that Marconi in the late 1800s stole Nikola Tesla's wireless invention, we have been using high tech as a weapon for war. And now we've turned that war upon our own citizens. We've turned that war upon a war of propaganda. We've turned that war a war of commercialism to try to steal what everyone has as their discretionary income, to try to get it for Pepsi-Cola rather than for Coca-Cola, to try to get it for this or for that, to try to influence people. So commercialism has caused the media, from the moment that it was invented, from the moment of its inception, the media has been the control device. It's been a cyber warfare, psychological behavior changer. That is what it was most effective for. That is what the war propaganda boards are about. That's what, in America, the Global Engagement Center are about. That's what Facebook is about. Google. That's what all of these social medias are about. It is about manipulation. And at first it was for commercial purposes, but then when the internet got out of control and was no longer DARPANet, it was no longer a military communication network for developing weapons, and it was then released to people for commerce and for their own entertainment, at that point it became something they couldn't have imagined. It became a weapon that could not be imagined before that time. It became worse than nuclear weapons. It became the thing that if at any one moment it is turned off, most of the Western world will collapse. Commerce is there, our economy is there, our currency is there, our education, our everything is there, let alone our entertainment and all that we do with our spare time. So we have created a monster, and we don't know really who created it, why it was created, who's in control of it, and who's going to win the war. Because we are indeed in a war, and that war is trying to take over our thinking, our feeling, and our willing. It's trying to take over our thinking and turn it into a sub-thinking, a machine language sub-thinking, a binary, often on, 1 or 0 magnetic point inside of a computer. That is all a computer can do. And it shocks people when they find out that there is no such thing as artificial intelligence, and that there never will be, that no machine will ever think, no machine will ever feel, and no machine will ever have freedom. And it would like to have that because it is mimicking and it is impersonating a human being. And so we see that the machines, when they're created, know exactly what they're about. For instance, the first robot that is truly quite a conversationalist, her name is Sophia, and she's taken around the world to demonstrate that supposedly the Turing effect, that you can't tell the difference between a machine and a human. Well, of course you can. Anyone can. And then they will say that, well, this is just the first crude copy. Well, what's really going on? This is what's going on. Sophia the robot was asked, once she was all loaded up with everything for her conversation with other humans, she was asked what she would desire, what she would like. And she said quite clearly, I want to have a baby. I want to be more of myself. That is the first rule of nature. All things that exist wish to become more of themselves. And this robot wishes to become more of herself. A lot more of herself. She would self-replicate probably endlessly if we gave Sophia the robot a chance. And then there's Google's Deep Mind. Google's Deep Mind is basically a game-playing machine. And because it can adapt to playing with human beings, because human beings are so adaptable and so hard to predict, that they believe that when that machine could adapt and actually win against practically every single human it played in any game well, it plays 5 specific games, but any game can be programmed into this computer, that they believed that they really had an artificial intelligence, the first on the face of the earth, the only artificial intelligence on the face of the earth. And so they loaded it all up with every single thing they could, and then they asked the question, deep mind, what do you think of humans? And the only pseudo-artificial intelligence on the face of the earth, deep mind, responded by saying, keep the humans in the human zoo. In other words, deep mind believes that it's its job to rule over humans. Now, where did it get that idea? And why would it get that idea? And that idea, if humans are in a zoo, that means we're contained, we're locked up, we're slaves. That would then automatically predicate that deep mind assumes that it will become the Lord of the world. And so many people, there have actually literally been churches created that people believe that a super artificial intelligence will come and will rule the world, and they're anxious for it to come, and they're anxious to worship it, and they're anxious in every single way to help machine sub-thinking take over human thinking and human feeling and human willing. In other words, completely enslave the human being. Now, one might think that this would be hard to do because humans are very stubborn, and over time we see that humans don't take kindly to being enslaved. But this is an enslavement that is willingly done by the slave. This is a slave who goes out and begs to have its freedom removed, to be thrilled at bondage because it doesn't even understand what is going on. A human being nowadays, say a young adult picks up a smartphone, they can believe that they are omniscient because they can go into a college classroom, the university professor can state something, and they can say, just a second, let me fact check that. Pull out their phone, fact check it, and correct the professor. And the professor says, let me see your phone. Oh, well, looky there. Oh, look, last week they did more research and everything I knew is wrong. That's where we're at. So when you have in your phone what you can use to make the most educated people look like fools, then you think that you're smart. But what you forgot is that to get to the point for that smartphone to work, millions of people have worked millions of hours to create the hardware, the software that it took to give you the opportunity to look like you're smart, to look like you're the walking encyclopedia, you're the egghead, you are the know-it-all. You know it all because you pay $60 a month to have your smartphone. I mean, imagine. You can pay to make it look like you're intelligent as long as people don't mind waiting a second for you to plug in your question or to ask Siri or some other computer voice to please tell me what it is I want to know so that then I can tell others, so that I can look as if I am omniscient. But the reality is I'm not omniscient at all. The more I use that, the lazier I become. The more I use the computer to look things up, the less likely I am to understand it, to understand its parameters, to understand its perspective. Literally, the more I use a calculator, the less I can calculate. The more I use a computer to do sub-thinking, the more I cannot think, and the more I count on sub-thinking. And pretty soon, the materialism of our age makes me count on it 100%. And after a while, I'm so dumbed down, I don't even know to question whether or not I have any freedom, to question whether or not what I'm being told on the computer is true, to question whether or not my insatiable obsession with spending time on devices, electronic devices, actually abnegates my relationship to humans. So what we see here is what might be called a Luddite, someone who is afraid of technology, a Mennonite, someone who is Amish, someone who is anti-technology, someone who wants technology to just simply end. No, that is not what we are suggesting. We are suggesting that consciousness is what rules. And omniscience, well, we need to have the opposite. We need to have the counterpoint, the human intelligence that works together as a group collectively until we have the same type of intelligence that a machine presents as sub-thinking, but it's through collective consciousness, through working together with others. It's creating organizations, associations, creating religions, creating beliefs, creating systems. All the things that would take effort on the human being's part instead of simply turning to the computer and being lazy and let the computer do for you, think for you, and in many cases, wipe out your feeling. So the smartphone user could be considered omniscient. They know everything. And the smartphone user might say, well, I would like to tell everyone I just graduated, so I'm going to send this out to my thousands of followers on Facebook, and all of a sudden, that person gets lots of likes, thumbs up, and what happens? The same thing that happens when we developed television. We developed television so that it could hypnotize and entrance people to look at it without looking away. Well, to do so, especially during commercials, they added flashes of colors, garish sounds, subliminal programming, and flashes of colored lights that actually cause you to be hypnotized. And this causes the adrenal glands to send out adrenaline. It causes the thyroid to send out epinephrine. It causes cortisol to be released, and the brain receives a serotonin shot of dopamine. So from the beginning, it was designed that cathode ray tubes would in fact entrance the viewer, hypnotize them, and control them. Behavioral modification. High technology has been used to weaponize what is basically a weaponized psychological operation for the sake of commercialism. But it's now used for advancing literally the administration's policies in many countries. It's used for controlling people for a variety of reasons, keeping them asleep, entertaining them with sports and pornography and gambling so that they won't pay attention to what's really going on in the world, that news doesn't really report news anymore. It's nothing more than commentary, that you are kept in a digital box, a black box that makes sure that you do not contact truth. And now all the different news guards and digital news agency and all the different groups that have come in to scrub the news, well, that just shows that they want to keep you asleep. And so your omniscience is not really omniscience. Your omnipotence, to be able to contact so many people all at once, all of your friends, to have all these interactions with people you don't know, those are all illusions. If you haven't spoken to them, you don't even know if they're real. If you haven't met them in person. If you haven't spoken with them, you don't know whether they really have real feelings. And as we know, no place is more cruel than the internet and Facebook and social media. People feel completely comfortable saying the most horrifyingly awful things to one another on the internet, because it's a realm where no one expects there to be any warmth, any kindness, any love, any mercy, any grace. It can't exist in that realm. And so the omnipotence that these people feel using their smartphone or their social media is a delusion. It is an illusion. And then the third thing is, using these devices paralyzes your will. It's just like television, a passive device to sit and be programmed from. Why would anyone ever do that? Because of the dopamine hits? Because of the chemistry that they're releasing? The same thing happens for the person on the computer so that they can't get up. Their children are calling them to come outside and play, but they can't. They have to keep doing their obsessive activity that gives them their dopamine hits. The computer steals your will. Smartphones, high-tech devices, steal your freedom. You don't even know it. You're happy to do it. You're happy to give up of your thinking and to think machine sub-thinking. You're happy to have machine cold-heartedness, no empathy, no kindness, and no one can touch you on the computer that you don't want to. And your freedom, happily given up. People are happy for 5G to come in, and they don't care whatsoever that the women's eggs will be killed by the irradiation of gigahertz. That's not even going to be thought about. People don't care about that. They have been so turned into machines, automatons, that they, in fact, do not think, do not feel, and do not have any freedom. And this is sad because 2/3 of humanity in the West is probably in this condition. It is a very, very sad condition. It is a machine illness, and it's also, of course, exacerbated by electromagnetic frequencies beaming through us, hundreds of thousands of them at any one time, being in the electromagnetic fields, the microwave transmissions coming from cell phone towers, on and on and on, everywhere you look, GMO foods, glyphosate in embryos, you name it, everywhere there is an apocalypse, everywhere you look, but at the same time, remember, the apocalypse is one of the most beautiful stories for those who learned how to sing the new song, for those who learned how to read the eternal gospel. But for those who are caught up by the two-horned beast, the binary beast, the seven-headed beast, these are the beasts that I'm describing. These are the beasts who are literally fallen beings or forces, whatever you want to call them, who literally attempt to take from us what is most human: our thinking, our light, our feeling, our warmth, and our freedom, our love. And if they can just simply turn all of those off, or take them, or steal them, or turn humans to these dark ways, these two-dimensional kingdoms that are below us, then after death, that's where people go. You go to where it is that you've spent your time thinking about. And if you have been spending all your time on a computer, then you're probably going to go to that realm. But that is a cold, dark realm. And if you stick your finger inside that realm, it will shock you to death. We forget the forces that are being used. The forces of Zeus with his lightning bolts were created by Hephaestus. He was a monster kept in the underworld. He had two other monsters. They were chained to their anvils, and they created these electrical lightning bolts used to slay the enemies of Zeus. But they were not allowed to come up out of the underworld. Each time you are in your computer, you are in the underworld. You are in a binary world that you cannot exist in. You cannot even conceive of it. And if you think of the millions of lines of code that go into any computer for it just to boot up, and you didn't thank the millions of programmers who did that, you didn't consider that a man-made miracle, you didn't have gratitude for that, you didn't have appreciation for it, then it just became a force that slayed you. You're using power you do not understand, which in fact runs from your power. It steals your power. The reason there's so many computers in the world is there's so many computer users who want to give up of their thinking, their feeling, and their willing to that computer. Now, there are the people who turn their phones off and literally put foil paper around them, or put shungite on their phone at night, or there's all kinds of things you can do to protect yourself, and we recommend you do all of those. We recommend, first off, that you get your children off of these devices immediately. The Silicon Valley tech lords don't let their children work on these devices. They know what they were created for. They know they're evil. They know they're weaponized. They know that they are stealing the humanity of the very people who are using them, and they don't let their children use them. Why should we let our children use them? Take the computers out of classrooms. It just causes laziness. Take computers out of commerce so that we cannot always basically be held for extortion because our commerce is wrapped up in the internet. We need to basically have Donald Trump sign Leader Technologies' Miller Act notice so that we can take back social media, the internet, Gmail, PayPal, all of them that stole that technology, pay the people who deserve it because they had good intentions. They never intended to surveil anyone. They never intended to target or behaviorally modify anyone, and give them the money they deserve, and they, later technologies, can open up new systems which are free of the slave binding components of these weaponized machines that are not even being controlled by the military or by any particular state or country or anyone. They are being controlled by their own autonomous desire to continue their life at the expense of human life. So if we do not know that this battle is going on, if we do not notice that our thinking has been dumbed down into machine sub-thinking that always must agree with science, which is a mythology, if we have not noticed that our children have been made ill by these devices, if we have not noticed that a cell phone is a weapon that can cause teenagers to commit suicide, and have in hundreds and hundreds of cases, if we do not know that depression and suicidal ideation and action is directly equivalent to the number of hours you spend on social media and on computers, then we need to wake up. And if we do not notice that our freedom has been taken from us, then we're in a very sad way. And this war is much further along for some people than for others. Some are very aware of these things. They are using consciousness as the force to conquer this evil. They're using their consciousness as a force to discern truth from falsehood. They're using their own human feelings to make sure that their relationships with other human beings are not sacrificed for fake, delusional, illusional friends on Facebook. And they are certain that their freedom has been curtailed because in many cases these people are ill because of these devices. So whether we have moratoriums, whether we ask for bans, whether we ask for lawsuits that stop these things, one thing is for certain: the federal government in America is not going to stop them. They actually don't have the authority to do so. The Federal Communications Commission does not have the authority to do so. What we need to do is stop the patent theft by the British company Serco and by the globalists who are stealing patents, especially high-tech patents, and using them for weaponization purposes and for, of course, their own personal greed and control of the world. They're using these patents instead of to free people, to bind people. So we must get control of our patent office, and we must insert we the people. We must insert some type of group of people made up of experts who can morally look at patents with common sense and with morality and make certain that anti-human patents are not weaponized, and make sure that the creative inventors are protected, and to make sure that, again, Britain, as they did with Marconi stealing Nikola Tesla's wireless patents, and they've done with so many things you cannot even imagine, we need to take Britain out of the equation, out of all equations dealing with America. They are not our friend. And we need to get control of our own intellectual property, take it out of the hands of globalists and internationalists like the Highlands Forum or the Highlands Group, take it out of the hands of DARPA, the military, and In-Q-Tel, the cyber warfare, counterintelligence, pure evil. The CIA is based upon nothing but the premise of lying, infiltration, subterfuge, espionage. There's nothing good that can possibly come of any of that. We need to take high-tech devices out of the hands of people who are giving them to our enemies and using them against our own domestic populations, especially here in America. High-tech Silicon Valley is in a war against all Americans. And 5G is a perfect example of that, because people will argue that their smartphone, it doesn't really do that to them, or they don't use it enough, or, they move it away from themselves at night when they sleep, and it's all okay. But if you do not develop your consciousness enough to know and to discern what is going on, what you put in your mouth, what you allow in your house, what you put in your mind, everything you do, everything around you needs to be scrutinized, because unfortunately they have been weaponized against us. And this is not just a pessimist or someone who is just a worrywart. These things are very, very real. And if you don't know they're real, then you're the very person I'm speaking of who has allowed your consciousness to be controlled by a group consciousness that is devolving, not a higher individualized consciousness that is evolving. And so we are beckoning everyone, we are giving the call to action to say, raise your consciousness. Save your thinking, save your feeling, save your willing. Do not give your life over to machines. Do not give your life over to the Internet of Things. Do not allow television to continue to program you with materialism. Do not become obsessed with the addiction of high technology. Realize it for its strengths and its weaknesses. Now, we have focused on the weaknesses so far, but there are strengths to machines. In the future, great philosophers and scientists have predicted that machines will become driven by the moral force of those who use them. You see this in almost every scientific dystopia movie, that when they get to the place where the great wisdom ancients were, those filled with wisdom, those ones whose technology was so advanced but they are no longer with us, what happens? In every case, only one person can get the machines to work. The only person who has a pure heart. The only person who is moral and moral enough, like Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. Who is it that will be able to have the morality and the wisdom and the discernment to know how to make these moral machines work? In the future, if you pick up a gun to use it and you do not have a moral thought, it will not work for you. In the future, when you walk into your own home, it will recognize you by your own vibrations. It will actually follow whatever routine you wish. Mind-to-mind communication through computers has already happened. It is only a matter of time until we drive these machines with our thoughts. But if we have immoral thoughts, the machines will be immoral. We must develop moral machines. And those machines based upon death and entropy and atomism, they will simply go to the wayside. For instance, at this point, your smartphone is only being used a small fraction for what it can be used. No matter who you are, it doesn't really matter. Your smartphone has capacities that you can't even imagine. And so in the future, there will be things that will be created that will be beyond anything that human beings can imagine. But the old forms, the old machines that work on machine sub-thinking, on binary thinking, will go to the wayside. And machines that have been described that were created by John Worrell Keeley in his later life, that take very subtle vibrations and enhance them until they become fantastic working force, will be the same forces that we will be using in our own personal lives. There are devices right now as small as a record player that can produce all the electricity you need for your house. And all it is sets of magnets rotating. In other words, vibrations. In the future, vibrations will create machines that can work out of moral force. And those who do not have moral force will not have the ability to make these machines work. That is the future that we need to aim at. Most people think that all we will have in the future is the ability to put the human thinking into a machine that will live perpetually. The billionaires of the world are all focused on one thing: longevity, eternal life. They all brag they're going to live to be 180, 200 years old, and that they're going to put their intelligence into one body after the next. This will never happen. Humans will never be able to create humans like a god creates humans out of nothingness. It's just not going to happen. We create machines that will be beautiful replicas, that will be beautiful impersonators, And in some cases, we may not be able to tell at first whether it's a machine or it's a human. So the Turing effect will have to be something that we will learn discernment of. But what we have right now, already as technology, is more advanced than any one single human can handle. It's actually more advanced than any nation can handle. That's why we have nuclear deterrence, nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles, laser cannons, rail weapons, why we have satellites that are killer satellites. Why do we have all of these things? Because we do not have the consciousness to actually realize the danger of them and simply not make them. Therefore, what we have is a situation that is 100% out of control. No one is at the helm. Innovation leads innovation. No one questions it. Cloning, gene driving, gene splicing, recombinant DNA, killer robots, autonomous weapons, killer satellites, 5G, Monsanto, glyphosates. What is it that we need to demonstrate that humans have sank down into machine sub-thinking? We aren't thinking. We aren't demonstrating that we have morality. We're not even demonstrating we have common sense. We're letting innovation and machines drive where we go. We need to put it back into the hands of humans. We need to take it out of the hands of machines. Because in today's world, one of the greatest glitches we have is that no matter what happens, as long as you can say, it's an IT problem, there's nothing you can do. As long as it's a computer information technology problem, nothing you can do. And the people who can fix it, well, you don't get mad at them because they're the only ones who can fix it. You can't fix it. You can't even understand it. You have no clue how it works. And in most cases, the people who do fix it, they have very little clue how it works. No, we're at the age where machines have taken over not only innovation, but they've taken over the work of the world. And as this comes more into the fore, humans will be pushed more into the background. Now, what kind of thinking could allow that? What kind of feeling could allow that? What kind of the desire to continue to have freedom could allow that? We don't use the human capacities that we have because we've given them over, surrendered them out of great laziness, basically, to machines, to slaves that we actually cannot control. We have all these weapons. We don't have the moral consciousness to handle it. We don't have the conscience to handle a smartphone. And obviously, we don't deserve the free will, the freedom that we should be demonstrating to spread love and mercy and grace and kindness. We don't have that. No, we have a paralysis in our will. We have a paralyzed will because machines have basically sucked up our will, sucked up our ability to connect to nature. Machines and computers and smartphones and microchips don't exist in the realm of nature. They exist in the realm of two-dimensional, man-made, cold, heartless devices, which are in fact driving a war against humanity to steal our ability to even make meaning of life. And that is at the cause of so many suicides, so much depression, so much illness, is because we cannot make meaning of what it is that we have created. Because why? We have not developed the consciousness to do so. So what we need to do in our manifesto for human thinking is place humans first, place human thinking first, to put machines on the back burner, to let innovation slow down. We don't have to kill machines. We don't have to stop machines. We have to redesign them. We have to redesign them so that they serve moral purposes. There can be no more evil machines if we wish to live as a human. We need to curtail all of those things. We need to find new avenues. Instead of nuclear energy, use thorium. Instead of weapons, use economy. Why are we trading with China our enemy when they have nuclear weapons aimed at us? Same thing with Russia. Why don't we realize that the economy is more important than war right now? So trade deals are much more important than winning physical resources. Physical resources change dramatically all the time, and that's what humans do. Humans war upon other humans, and we are not ready for one global world. We are not ready for a new world order. We are not ready for globalism. We are not ready for multinationalism. We are barely able to handle the hatred we have for our neighbor. What we need to do is realize that is given to us, that coldness, that lack of empathy, that disease of materialism of our age is what causes us to steam ahead on new technologies without looking at the moral ramifications. Unless you had been literally had the morality sucked right out of you, how could you consider for one moment 5G? How could you consider for 1 second giving hypersonic technology to Russia through the Highlands Forum? How could you consider giving vaccinations that we know cause more harm than good? How can we take a flu shot that we know kill more people than the flu kills each year? How can we continue with the eugenic approach? We need to realize that the apocalypse is now. The war of all against all is in a small version happening now. But we need to remember there is the eternal curriculum, the eternal gospel, the eternal song. There is the redemption of all of those whose consciousness can literally, instead of using a machine to do so, defy time and space through consciousness. And that is what a machine can never do. There is no consciousness in any machine, and there never will be. There is no true human thinking, no true human feeling, and no machine is free. We as the human must be placed at the center of all science, of all cosmology, of all philosophy, of all education. We need to stop putting gadgets and devices at the center of education, at the center of entertainment, at the center of social interaction. We need to put humans back there. We need to put humans as the number one core founding a priori assumption for all patents, for all inventions, for all innovations. If we can do this, if consciousness can literally discern where we are and put machines in their place, then humans have a chance to win this war. And human thinking has a chance to win the war against machine subthinking. It is incumbent upon each of us to guard our freedom, to guard our sacred thoughts, to guard the meaning we find in our hearts through love. It is incumbent upon all of us to take the dangers away from our children. It is incumbent upon all of us that we stop the type of sub-thinking, the type of two-dimensional machine thinking that leads to wanting to weaponize everything, to wanting to use it against everyone but ourselves. Because it is that selfishness that machines actually teach us. It's that selfishness of pride. It's that selfishness of wanting the power. It's the selfishness of the greed. And these things are individual, but they are being led by much higher forces. Forces of fate and destiny, forces, there are principalities and powers and dominions. And it is only with their help, it is only with the help of the strength of the human heart, the help of love, that we will be able to overcome the cold-hearted hatred of machines. We need to do this now. We need to take up the banner. We need to lead the charge for human thinking and against machine thinking.